right, welcome everyone. Today is episode number 40. Can't believe I'm already at episode number 40, and I have a very special guest. And yes, I realize I say that about all of my guests, but I truly feel that way about every individual that comes on Your Life Projectized. So today is no different. The title of today's episode is called Beyond the Message, Why Great Communication Starts with Better Stories. And I think this is it's going to be such an impactful episode because, right, especially for those who are listening who are in the business world and especially project managers, right, we have to be great communicators. So with that said, I'm so excited to introduce you all to someone that I consider a friend, someone I've been connected to for quite some time in the online community. Let me introduce my very special guest, Dave Summers. So, Dave, please say hello to the audience, let them know a little bit about you, and yeah, let's get started.
Excellent. Hello, Parmjit's massive audience. My name is Dave Summers. I'm a recovering corporate warrior. I've spent about 8 or 9 years in straight up corporate consulting with Accenture. Prior to that, I was in consumer packaged goods, IT forever. But most of that work was on the tech side. And I about 5 to 6 years ago, coincidentally with COVID, I became an independent. And now I brand myself or I label myself as a narrative strategist and producer because I want to cover both the consulting advisory sides of it as well as the tech and production side. So in a nutshell, that's it, Parmjit.
Okay, well, I love it, Dave. And honestly, that is just a small snippet of everything that you do because I know you have such an incredible background. And I'm glad, Dave, that you mentioned that you do consider yourself a narrative strategist, but rather than maybe than a storyteller. So, Dave, can you share with us like what is the difference between the two?
Yeah, it's there's an awful lot of storytellers on LinkedIn right now.
Yeah.
Everyone's telling stories or they're consulting on storytelling. For me, and everybody's got their own definition. My definition is basically a storyteller, okay?
Yeah.
Person who bills themselves as a storyteller or storytelling consultant. They help you tell your story well. Okay,
Yes.
that's kind of what, in my mind, that's what they do. Whereas a narrative strategist, to differentiate it a little bit, I sort of help people determine what that story actually is.
Okay.
So it's sort of like what are the Lego bricks that constitute a good story? And there's a fair amount that goes into that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It absolutely does. And I'm so glad you brought that up. And because something else I wanted to ask you. So, yeah, storytelling is so important. And again, I tie that back to communication and how it relates to my role. So there's a lot of project managers that listen to my podcast, and that's actually the community that I typically target, but also businesses and organizations. So I love that today's focus, Dave, is on communication because in a lot of what we do, right, we are communicating all the time, whether that's in project management, whether that is in our day-to-day lives, right? Think about our personal relationships, we're always communicating. But thinking back to organizations, they communicate a lot, but they don't necessarily connect, right? So and I know again, you have a lot of experience and I know you've consulted a lot, but in your opinion, why do you think that a lot of these organizations, even though they're communicating, they're not connecting necessarily?
Connection versus communication. I mean, in a perfect world, they're
Yeah.
kind of they're good partners, right?
Yeah.
They're riding shotgun and they're getting things done. I think the issue with a connection, a lot of times it has to do with the ability of the storyteller or the person who wants to relay the story
Yeah.
to sort of show better empathy or to be more in a position to relate to their audience. It's understanding the audience. Just
Yes.
really quick. a leader, let's say, or a project
Hmm.
manager, let's say, has their orientation of what a project is, of what success looks like.
Right.
Okay. But in many cases, that's this satellite that's orbiting the planet Earth and it's looking down on Earth and saying, aha, I envision the solution. Let me tell you about it. Meanwhile, the audience that's supposed to receive this is, riding the planet's surface on some continent, looking up and going, okay, great. The weather must be great up there.
Yeah.
Down here, it's like totally different. So the challenge with communication and connection is to empathize. It's to sort of walk in your audience's shoes. That's one of the questions I ask all my clients is like, who's your target audience for this content or for this work that we're doing? So I think that's
Right.
where the connection communication thing is really needs to be addressed.
Oh, absolutely. Dave, you are 100% correct. And I think that also talks to organizational change management. And when there is a change, for example, in your organization, taking the different individuals or the different stakeholders that are within your organization along for the ride and understanding, well, how is this change going to impact them? And if there is resistance to this change, why is there resistance? And oftentimes it's what you just said, uh, the organization, and I'll use this as I used to work in healthcare, so I'll use this example. And if we implemented a new software, um, that was great, right? The organization wants to implement this new software, but they didn't necessarily understand why the different users within the organization were resistant to this new software. But it's because they didn't understand, number one, why is the organization making this change? What is the benefit to all of those different individuals that are going to be using this software? How is it specifically going to impact their specific work stream? And a lot of the leadership didn't communicate that. So then they didn't understand, well, where's the disconnect? Well, the disconnect is you didn't really understand your audience and how
Yeah.
it impacts your audience.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement there, and I think it's also you'll find, and you know this is a great project management person. It's how much ownership of this change or of this project or of their role within a project or their deliverables within that project. How much of
Yes.
it did they have ownership in developing and envisioning? Because people will be passionate about things, about drawings that they made, about designs that they've come up with. So, a good project manager kind of walks that tightrope of empowerment and sort of says, okay, I want you to own this. I want you to be passionate about this. I want you to get the story within the constraints of this world that I'm giving you. But allowing them to create, allowing them to produce means they're going to be far more passionate about it. And so, again, the project manager needs to kind of walk that careful tightrope of empowerment, but at the same time constraining it to the end goals and budgets and whatnot.
Yeah, ensuring that there isn't extra scope being added and all that for sure. Yeah, and I'm glad. So that was a perfect segue into what I wanted to really talk about next is so your LinkedIn. So obviously, Dave, you and I connected on LinkedIn, which is one of the reasons I love LinkedIn because you are able to connect with so many creative minds. You being one of them. So your LinkedIn says that your work lives between signal and noise. And so in today's world, Dave, where everyone seems to be creating content, how do leaders figure out, okay, what deserves to be communicated and what should be left unsaid?
That's that's the $64,000 question, right?
Yeah.
Because we're drowning in content,
Oh my gosh, yeah.
and the challenge becomes what is meaningful, what is useful.
Yeah.
How does it help someone make a better decision? How does it help someone feel less confused? How does
Yeah.
it help them understand the roadmap ahead? And I think the idea to suss out signal from noise, because people can be deceived. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They can be, I mean, God knows how many times back in the day, I'm dating myself, forgive me, but back in the day, some C-suite person would be on an airplane flight and they'd pick up an airline magazine and there would be this brilliant idea about how to solve outsourcing of yada yada, whatever the
Yeah.
case might be. And they'd bring back the airline magazine and they'd be like, just do this, see this, do this. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
you'd be like,
Yeah.
okay, that's, is it appropriate? Who's the audience? What's the product? What's the solution? What are the constraints?
Yeah.
I guess brass tacks is signal and noise. Noise is like everything you're being fire hosed with.
Yeah.
Signal is the ability to filter it and to appropriately move through that. The other thing I don't want to lose touch with is particularly these days is the human side of all of this stuff. I always position myself as sort of the human advocate, even though I
Yeah.
find myself like elbows deep in AI and stuff like that. I
Yeah.
think that's an important part of the signal and noise equation is what are the human factors?
Yeah, and I'm so glad you mentioned that, Dave, because I do think oftentimes, especially in corporate and business, we forget the human side and right, and we expect our teams to perform at a certain level, and we forget everyone is human, right? People when they leave, they go home, they might have several problems that they're dealing with. I think also people forget sometimes that leaders are also human
Mhm.
and they forget to show those them grace as well. So I'm glad you mentioned the human side. Yeah, I think that's so important. And you mentioned AI just now. So
Mhm.
so I know that you've embraced AI as part of your creative toolkit, but you know, kind of going to the point that you just made, you've constantly emphasized authenticity and humanness. So as AI becomes more capable, and obviously we're seeing AI changing every single day. There's always something new. I mean, it's hard to keep up actually.
Mhm.
But what do you think will become even more valuable about human communication?
I have two kind of distinct buckets when I talk about the AI and then the human connection. To an extent, I have embraced AI, but
Yeah,
it's only because it allows me to be, I mean, crazy productive. You know what I
yeah,
mean? And
yeah,
but I think you need to understand that and respect what AI is and what it's not. I mean,
yeah,
AI can generate options. If you're interested in getting a bunch of options, how well you've educated and prepared it and worked with it will have an effect on how good those options are. Okay.
mm-hmm,
Humans, humans provide taste. Okay. Which is sort of this ineffable, non-AIable thing yet. Okay.
yeah,
Humans provide context. Now, AI is getting better at context, but sometimes, holy cow, its hallucinations of context are mind boggling. They can be hysterically funny sometimes.
yeah,
And other times they scare you to death
yeah,
with what they've linked up. The other thing humans bring is they bring lived experience and everything that comes along with lived experience. I mean, the passion, the fear, projects that really didn't work out, you know what I mean? The scar
yeah,
tissue, the lessons learned. Humans bring moral judgment. Okay.
yeah.
AI doesn't have moral judgment. Okay.
No,
We've got memory. AI memory is getting better, but we've got memory. But the cool thing about our memory is there typically is emotion attached to our memory, which can paint
yes.
it in deeper, richer colors. We can be funny. We can be humorous. AI is trying so hard to be a stand-up comedian, and it's not there yet. Okay.
It's not.
And just two quick other things.
Yeah.
One is humans, not all of them, but the good ones, they have restraint. They know, right? I mean, they know we don't need 14 slides. Seven is
Yeah.
fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We don't need all of this detail here. If someone asks, great news. We've got the detail. And finally, a concept that I work with occasionally is this whole thing that I call weirdness or the weird.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and weirdness to me is people kind of roll their eyes and they think, what is he talking about? Like X-Files or Twilight Zone stuff or whatever. Not really. To me, weirdness is again what makes you human. What do you find interesting? What stories or characters or people or foods or smells or whatever history that you read about, people you think are amazing, people you think are not amazing, but that weirdness is those kind of people or those ideas that say, did you ever notice? Or isn't it odd how, you know what I mean? And you answer those questions. And AI is trying real hard, but it can't do those things yet. But AI will give you options, and you got to be able to be clever with how you work with those options.
Yeah, no, and that little bit of weirdness is what makes us unique, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Well, you don't want to be boring. That's one of my, capital sort of commandments is do not be boring, you know?
100%. No, and I actually I do remember. I think I saw that on your LinkedIn somewhere because you do describe your work as blending clear thinking with a little bit of weirdness, and I
Mhm.
really, Dave, I love that phrase so much. I consider myself a weirdo.
Good.
I'm proud of
Welcome. Your t-shirt is in the mail. Okay, just
it.
rip it open and put it on like the rest of us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm glad to be part of the club. So, why do you think, Dave, that creativity and again, maybe a little bit of weirdness is so important when we're trying to really customize ideas or I'm sorry, customize, communicate ideas that stick. Like, why is that important?
I think the weirdness and the uniqueness, if used appropriately, can really simplify a lot of things. It can bring people along a little bit quicker, at least from an emotional standpoint, that makes them want to work at the logical stuff,
Yeah.
if that makes any kind of sense.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, we all don't have to be Winston Churchill in front of a microphone here, but we do have to have. I mean, as leaders or even managers, come on now, you do have to have the ability to, uh, you know, be interesting. Make complicated ideas memorable, right? And that's not always the easiest thing to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it 100% does. And I love the word that you just used, memorable. Because right, our brains, right, we are constantly consuming information and
Yeah.
our brains can only hold or recall so much information. And the information that we typically will recall is information that is memorable or a person that is memorable or something that caused us to have an emotional response, right? I think about why, it's so funny. I always say, some men will say, women will always remember when you did them dirty, for a lack of a better term,
Okay.
right?
I know you're trying to trap me into something, and I won't fall for it.
I I promise I'm not.
Not falling for it, Parmesan.
You got me. You knew you saw what I was doing, Dave.
Sorry.
But it's funny, but we will often remember things, right? Like we can remember, oh, well, you did this a year ago, and it's not necessarily that we have better memories, but it's because it something that maybe our partner did caused
Mhm.
an emotional response,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. Right?
Yeah. So yeah, I love that you can relate that. But yes, I absolutely agree. It is important for what we're communicating to be memorable. And if we are memorable as humans or we've done something that creates an impression on someone, and maybe it is that little bit of weirdness, I think that is something that people will remember.
Mhm.
For sure. And so you also write, Dave, you write a lot of articles. And so one of your articles talks about focused curiosity.
Mhm.
So in project management, a lot of us are taught to solve problems very quickly. I mean, that is what we're supposed to do. And
Mhm.
but curiosity sometimes requires us to slow down a little bit.
Mhm.
So how can leaders balance the pressure to deliver with the need to stay curious?
That's great. That's a great question. I had a manager when I was pretty newbie in consulting, who
Yeah.
basically had a motto. They must have had it it's probably going to be on their epitaph or something like that. And I'm sure
Yeah.
you've heard it a million times, but it made an impression on me. And that was, there are two ways to do something. Okay. Do
Yeah.
it right or do it again, you know?
Yeah.
And a piece of that was applying what I call a focused curiosity. Focused curiosity is not wandering around aimlessly, right? There's
Yeah.
some discipline to it. But the ironic thing, and again, the paradox is it's disciplined openness. Okay. Again, applying certain kind of human filters there, what matters and what doesn't. And I believe that's a skill anyone can learn, but
Yeah.
they have to keep doing it, right?
Yeah.
I'm a voracious reader. And reading, okay, it's 2026, Parmjit. Reading is a lot of people are kind of slacking off on the reading. They think they're going to learn everything through YouTube or from the matrix cable plugged into the back of their head. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And for me, reading is just that kind of experience of, didn't I read something about that like 4 or 5 years ago or last month or something like that? And I'm able to sort of, you know, connect the dots or at least put me in a different place where I can focus a little bit more. And just because somebody solved the problem, for instance, your example before of rolling out software, it's absolutely one size does not fit all,
100%.
right? And there's this balance that you have to maintain. But you need to create, I guess the thing is, if you're interested in speed, and who isn't, you need to sort of respect this idea of small pauses and small checkpoints and corrections and stuff like that. Again, I heard a trainer say just last week on something I was attending, when you're doing face-to-face or classroom training with groups or something like that, and you're getting them to do a scenario or whatever, the other thing was correct as you go. Don't let them do the whole thing and then do checklist, checklist, check, check, check. This person was an advocate, especially for newbies, of as you go, make corrections. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that's right for everybody, but in this particular case, it's things like that, that I think can still keep curiosity alive, but can do that correction, that course correction and that modification that still keep things constrained and sort of on point. Again, I'm flying wildly through this whole ironical big small, jumbo shrimp, that kind of thing. But it's a paradox I think you have to manage. And just one final thought on that, curiosity does not have to slow everything down, right?
Right.
I mean, some things can move along, and just if you're a good project manager, you'll know some things can, travel a little bit further ahead, you know what I mean? And you'll connect later or whatever. You have to be smart enough to realize what those paths are,
Yeah, absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. 100%. That's one of the reasons, Dave, that I love. So in project management, we have different methodologies. So I learned when I got my PMP, which is the project management professional certification. I was trained on waterfall, which means, you have to finish one phase of your
Yep.
project before you start the next, right? Now,
Dependencies, all that. Yep.
100%, exactly. Now we've moved into the adoption of more an agile way of thinking where you can work on multiple things at once. You don't have to finish planning before you execute. You can be
Yep.
doing a little bit of planning while also doing a little bit of
Yep.
executing, right?
Yep.
And then I also like what you said about basically continuous improvement, right? Things
Hmm.
don't have to be perfect right now, right?
Hmm.
You can continuously improve. So I
Hmm.
talk about in a lot of my episodes, I talk about the iPhone a lot, right? So when the iPhone first came out, right? Steve Jobs, it wasn't perfect. I
Hmm.
mean, it was great, but think about how many iterations of the iPhone have come out
Absolutely.
since, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Or even pre iPhone. The I'm dating myself yet again. God help me. I'm an old guy. But the guys who developed the Palm devices, remember Palm devices before iPhones and stuff like that?
Yep.
They literally had people walk around the office with little blocks of wood that were
Yeah.
blocks of wood that were about the size of the product, and they would try to bake this idea of during the course of their business day they would pick up the block of wood and say, well, it's at this point that I would make a calendar entry. It's at
Yeah.
this point that I would make a note to myself. It's at this point that I would send off an email or something like that, just for like the physical memory
Yeah.
side of it. And there are different approaches to that. And the last thing I'll say about curiosity is, I mean, done right, done well, it absolutely prevents expensive rework further down the line.
Yes, absolutely. Could not agree more. Yeah, I know, absolutely. And I think we all want to avoid that rework. If you one thing, one thing I love about Agile, so I'm also a Scrum Master, and one thing that I love about Agile is you have sprint retrospectives where,
Hmm.
similar to lessons learned in Waterfall, where you're looking at, okay, what went well in this sprint, what didn't go well, what do we want to repeat,
Hmm.
what can we do better next time,
Hmm.
and rather than waiting for the iPhone to come out and saying, okay, well, there were all these bugs that we should have fixed, you're every 2 weeks you are doing, or at a regular cadence, you're doing a retrospective and
Right.
finding those things early on. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, I'm in total agreement. You will not find a bigger advocate of prototyping than me. I
Yeah.
mean, just get something out, to your group or to your team or to respected stakeholders or something like that, as early as you can afford to. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And sort of shape it. You know what I mean? As you go. I mean, whether it's a user experience or an offering or something like that, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
I'm a gigantic fan of you know prototyping.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Same here. We are on the same page. We're totally aligned, Dave. I love that. So, Dave, if so, we're getting close to the end of our time, but like I honestly I feel like I could talk to you forever. Like you just have such a wealth of information. If I could burrow into your brain and capture some of that wealth of knowledge, I mean, gosh, I'd be a better person for it. Um, but it's okay. So if every organization hired a narrative strategist, right, before launching a major transformation or a major project, what mistakes, Dave, do you think that they would stop making?
I think they would come to an understanding that it doing an approach like that, working with a narrative strategist and determining what is the story, what are the components of the story, it would
Yeah.
allow you to connect. We used the magic word connect a little bit earlier,
Yep.
to connect earlier in the
Yeah.
process and to get adoption and to get passion. Okay,
Yeah.
human, earlier in the process, and it would also allow you to suss out the non-essential stuff. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? That, what do I care if it's made in the Southeast? I don't, that's not a relevant part of the conversation.
Right.
You learn the elements of speed, right? And you learn
Yeah.
what parts of the story or the narrative you can leave out and what are the key points. And I think that's, again, I'm kind of, it sounds like I'm being precious with this whole idea of narrative strategy over storytelling. Storytelling is just too big of an umbrella. It
Yeah.
just it just is. And I think narrative strategy allows you to be a little bit more. Again, the metaphor I always come back into is narrative strategy allows you to build Lego bricks.
Yeah.
Okay, and these bricks, if they're done well, they stand awesome on their own. Okay,
Yeah.
they're engineered. They will put a hole in your foot in the middle of the night when you're walking across a living room floor. Okay, but the neat thing is they plug into other things if they're engineered and designed right. And I believe that's what's involved in a narrative strategy. Things are of a family. That's another way I describe things. They're of a family. They're not, holy cow, this looks nothing like the user manual. You know what I mean? Or this looks nothing like the training that you gave me. Does that make sense?
It 100% does, and I love that example that you used. I think that all, yeah, I know makes complete sense, Dave. Thank you, and thank you for sharing that example. And
Happy to.
so, Yeah, and Dave, and so you help. So I again, a lot of the work that you've done, you've helped a lot of people communicate better, right? So you've helped people communicate everything from books to webinars to podcasts. Speaking of podcasts, so what's Dave? What's your process for taking a complicated idea and maybe turning it into something that, and it kind of goes back to what we talked about a little bit earlier, something that people actually remember, making it memorable.
I pride myself on my listening skills. So a lot of it is, just sitting down with the person who is my primary stakeholder and
Yeah,
and seeing if there are other people in a close orbit around them, because typically any meaningful project or idea person has a wingman or a wingwoman associated with them who will protect them and will protect the idea through the trials, tribulations, vicissitudes of what it takes to get something off the ground. So I try to
yeah,
work with a small team of those people and their wing team, whatever. And I try to get out of them what they think the key points are, the differentiators are, the basic stuff that you hear everybody talk about. But then I take it a level further down. You know what I mean? And the question I always ask people is, well, who's the audience for this? And invariably, I get, in many cases, I get that, well, everybody. And you're like, okay,
yeah,
time out.
yeah,
Totally time out. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And you boil it down, you distill it down, you distill it down, you distill it down to here are the primary users, or here's the primary target group, and this is why. You know what I mean? And then you do the whole thing of, I frequently do the whole empathy map exercise, and I say, how do you want them to feel about
yeah,
this thing? What do you want them to say about this thing after they've used it? You know what I mean?
yeah,
How do you want them to think about it? And that helps me essentially kind of distill those Lego bricks into, okay, then we need to mention dit, 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 dit. You know what I mean? We need to hit hard on this, that kind of thing. For many of these people, English might be a second language.
yeah.
There are a whole bunch of things that go into that, whatever. And from that, frequently, I'm not going to lie, Parmjit, I back people into sort of saying, it's not one thing you're interested in. Okay.
Right.
It's not one thing. It's, for starters, it might be five. I have magic numbers in my head. Five is a magic number, seven is a magic number. And what I'm trying to say is, okay, what you're looking for isn't this. It's five of these.
Yeah,
Okay. And how you use these and how you assemble them, or it's seven of them. And why am I doing that? Because typically those are either videos or they're podcasts or webcasts or whatever, but they're incremental, and they can build on each other or they can stand alone. But these days you're doing it so that people don't waste time
yeah,
watching and absorbing and consuming stuff that they don't need to. Or even better, you're giving them the option of absorbing that material. And then boom, you get ownership because they made the choice to ingest it. Okay. And then the second thing is always try to make it interesting. You know what I
yeah.
mean? Don't run away from the human side of it. Cannonball into the swimming pool. It might be uncomfortable for people, and it's a weird time for humor and stuff like that. And I'm not saying jokes wall to wall, but what I'm saying, acknowledge the human side of whatever it is you're doing from that standpoint.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned that, Dave, because I'm all about the humanist, the human element, right? And I get, right, there's a place for business, and right, you have your goals, you have your requirements, for example, in a project, and all that's fine and dandy, but also remember there's also a human element that you need to always keep in mind. And then to kind of tie to that somewhat, you also talk a lot about, and I love this because I talk about it a lot too. You talk about authenticity, which I think, Dave, is so important in communicating. Um, People can tell when you're being authentic and when you're being inauthentic, right? And I use LinkedIn as an example. People will talk about, well, you have so many connections, or you have such a big network, and you seem to have a lot of really good people within your network. And I've been asked this question before, well, how did you build that network?
Mhm.
And I said, well, there was no real strategy necessarily.
Mhm.
I was just being authentic, and I was
Yeah.
being transparent and genuine. And I think people recognize that, and people can appreciate when you're
Pe-
being
pe-
authentic with them.
people seek that out, and a lot of people are afraid of being themselves. They feel they're just not ready for prime time. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
they're worried about how they even what are we, 7 years post COVID, 6 years post COVID,
yeah.
they're still worried about how they show up in front of webcams. They're still worried about how they sound on conference calls. And again, human side of that whole thing. And
Right.
the reason why you're so successful on LinkedIn is, again, you are authentically you. And
Thank
the
you.
value you offer in the content you deliver, the relationships you decide to promote, the other people you decide to become an advocate for, the articles you point out, the whatever, people find value in that. And that makes you a different, noticeable, you're the porch light, you know what I mean? Attracting things to it, you know?
Yeah.
And the other thing is you've got a big following, Parmjit, but you don't have everybody, nor should you want everybody, because a
Yeah.
friend to everybody is like not really a friend to anybody, if you know what I'm saying.
Yes, absolutely. Firstly, Dave, thank you so much for saying that. That is very kind, and I feel the same exact way about you.
Thank you.
I absolutely, even in my personal life, my friend circle is very small. I mean, right, I'm on my social media. I might have a lot of connections and followers, but my friend circle is very small. And I purposely have a very small friend circle because those are the people I can speak to about anything and show
Mhm.
up as my authentic self at all times. And so absolutely. And so I asked this question, Dave, of everyone before I wrap up of my episodes. I always ask this question because I love people, and I love to kn learn about people and their what they wanted to be as when they were little kids, right? Because we all end up in these positions, right? I'm a project manager. Did I want to be a project manager when I was a little girl? No, I didn't want to be a project manager
No,
when I was a little girl,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
So thinking back to little boy Dave Summers, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I can answer that extremely quickly. I wanted to be a movie special effects guy because I was fascinated by Godzilla movies and King Kong movies and stuff like that. And at a very early age, I realized, probably too early, I realized it was a guy in a suit. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? But that didn't turn me off to it. That, if anything, that made me a little bit more engaged with it, because then I began to think right to left. And then I began to think, well, they're blowing up Tokyo every other movie. That must mean that they have to rebuild Tokyo, and who's building Tokyo? And
Yeah.
there's, your little boy gears begin to grind about, that's a lot of model railroad stuff, isn't it? And that's a lot of, so that's what I was just incredibly interested in, like fantasy and science fiction movies in particular. And that triggered in me this ability to sort of deconstruct, what went into a meaningful, dramatic story or user experience, as the case might be. And I think that's had an impact on me going forward.
I love that. And I mean, in many ways, that's exactly what you're doing, right? I mean, with your YouTube videos and all the work that you're doing. And I love, and so I ask this question of every person who's on my podcast, and it's so fascinating to me that in some way, individuals are doing what they wanted to do when they were
Yep.
little,
Yep.
right? It's just maybe in a different way.
Yep.
Maybe it just looks different.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, Dave, I so loved this conversation, and you are everything that I imagined you to be. You are creative, you're authentic, you're kind, you're a professional, and all the accolades don't do you justice, honestly.
Okay.
So,
Overload my head. It's actually getting bigger. Oh my God.
as it should, as it
Thank you
should.
so much, Parmjit. You again. I defer to your taste on these matters as one human to another human. I appreciate that, and I think you do awesome work with your community. So thanks for the opportunity.
No, thank you so much, Dave. I appreciate you. And again, thank you so much for coming on.
No problem.
Okay.
Thank you.